Hi everyone, my name is Hunter Christensen, one of the students in Accounting 6650 at Southern Utah University. Today I'm going to be going over a case from Chapter 2, case number 4, and I'm going to begin by bringing you all up to speed about the scenario revolving around this case and what's included. So this case in Chapter 2 revolves around a young man named Jackson Daniels, not to be confused with Jack Daniels, but Jackson Daniels. Jackson's a recent college graduate working in the accounting department at a manufacturing company. Jackson is asked to prepare a sales budget for the next year for his boss, which then he ultimately makes an error in this budget. And this error comes to fruition while he's out getting drinks with a close friend of his, where he tells him, "I think I may have forecasted too high." Jackson's friend then tells him, "Oh, this is something you just want to let ride out. This isn't something you want to tell anybody about. This could ultimately, be the cost of your job and your career by this error." And Jackson kind of contemplates things and ultimately decides that he owes credit to everyone involved for, to come forward and admit that he'd made an error. So Jackson decides to tell Pete, who he had sent the budget to, and Pete was going to take a look at it and then decide if he needed to hire more people depending on the sales budget and kind of take a look at where the numbers were at. So Jackson tells Pete that he wants a meeting with him to kind of discuss this budget. Jackson goes into his meeting with Pete, openly, comes forward and says, "Look, I've made an error. I forecasted things too high." Pete then tells him, there's a lot of things involved here. Let's not say anything to our boss. Let's just forget this conversation ever happened. And so ultimately this kind of leaves Jackson in a very difficult situation. So Jackson is left with three options here. He can take Pete's advice, not tell anyone about this conversation. 2, he could tell somebody else, not their boss, about the error. Or 3, he could just actually come forward and tell his boss about the error. The advised solution then is to actually come forward and tell his boss, who happens to be named Jose Cuervo, but to actually come forward and tell him about this error. There's a lot involved with, Jackson and Pete's reputations on the line, with them being trustworthy to handle such a task. Their advancement, their jobs are on the line. Their ability to handle future projects are on the line, and also the jobs of those that Pete hired are on the line. So there's a lot at stake in this scenario that can be solved and taken, for granted if something weren't to come to fruition. So Jackson kind of needs to, as he prepares to come forward, he needs to take a look at what are the main arguments for not coming forward. And these kind of boil down to either our jobs are on the line, forecasts are never really accurate, we could blame it on something else, but ultimately all of these are invalid. Jobs are on the line if you don't say anything. Forecasts are never accurate when people don't admit their errors and they just leave it how it is. And blaming it on a different factor, ultimately it always comes out to the wash of where were we wrong. So these arguments are invalid, but are the typical ones that Jackson may see. And so as a response, taking in those arguments and seeing, what the response should look like, Jackson should go to Pete and say, "Look, I know our jobs and reputations are on the line here, but it's a lose-lose situation if we don't say anything. Either we say nothing, and the budget's wrong, which then hurts our reputations to provide accurate details, or we say nothing, it all kind of works out, but then we become liars who hid information." So we're losing either way there. The best thing for us to do is to actually get ahead of the situation and tell Mr. Cuervo about our error, and then kind of devise a plan of how we're going to handle the repercussions that come from it. This is going to show that we're smart enough to recognize our errors, we're smart enough to create solutions, and it'll help our reputations and possibly give us some advancement opportunities because we're able to see these things. So what do you say we devise a plan together of how to tackle this? And doing a situation like that where they together devise a plan, This kind of eliminates the confrontation between Jackson and Pete of, a he said, she said type situation, but puts them together on the same team, devising to work towards the same solution. So I would advise that Jackson take a similar course of action to this. Thanks.